Hare Krishna. Wow, what a turnout. Well, firstly, congratulations to all of you for being the lucky few to have actually got the golden ticket. Did you actually get the email through Eventbrite to say, I have confirmation, I will be at the Spiritual Master event? There were many people that didn't get it, and for all those people, they're actually watching online right now because they didn't get a ticket. So 200 people confirmed. I think there's about probably just over 100. So what that means is another 100 are going to fit into here. So what that means, if you could move forward and across, that would be absolutely fantastic. Right, so since we're on housekeeping, if anyone does have children, firstly, congratulations. We do have a dedicated room for children because we do know that children sometimes make noise when asked not to. So that's my own personal experience. So if you have a very well-trained child, absolutely please keep them in here. But if you notice them doing what children do, please do make use of this wonderful facility that's right here. If you have a mobile phone, think about the upgrade. But more importantly, please do switch it off. And finally, if there is a fire, I would suggest pray to Krishna. And then it looks like that's the nearest door. So, just calmly go that way and then run as fast as you can. So that's the housekeeping out of the way. So I wanted to talk to you about this special event that we have today. And I want to take you back to a special year, 1966. Now, as you all know, 1966 is a very important year for people in England. Because not too far from here, Wembley Stadium, England were playing West Germany, and they lifted the World Cup. It was an amazing, amazing event, and people up and down the country were celebrating. England had finally won the World Cup. They raised Jules Rimet. The Queen was there, everyone was there. It was a fantastic achievement. But little did they know that whilst they were celebrating up and down the country, just across the pond in America, something far more significant was happening. Something that meant that even the demigods were celebrating. And what was that event? The spiritual master of all three worlds had made his way across from India to America, and he had finally decided that he was going to incorporate the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. An amazing, amazing event, 50 years, and of course we're celebrating the 50-year anniversary today. So many of us have heard of Srila Prabhupada. Many of us have read his books. We may have heard the audio classes, may have seen his videos. But not so many can say that they've been fortunate enough to actually spend some personal time with him, or indeed serve him in a personal capacity. So we are most honored and fortunate to have with us today His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami. Just a little bit about Maharaj. So in 1970, he actually was in India, and he moved across to Germany to study chemistry. And during the course of his studies, he came across the Vedic teachings in more detail. And during that period, he decided chemistry is important. If you've got children here, it is very important. But he realized there was something slightly higher than even chemistry, the absolute goal of life. So he returned to India with real determination, a determination to take spiritual life to the next level, to dedicate his life. And he did that. And he realized in order to do that, he needed to find a spiritual master. So for 1 year, he searched. He went to the Himalayas. He met many saintly personalities. But he wasn't able to find his spiritual master until he came across a very special book. And that book was right here. It's been moved. So I was going to show you, whoever was in control of my props, I don't know what's happened here. But it was The Nectar of Devotion. And Maharaj was completely touched by this book. He studied it in depth, and he realized very quickly that the author of this book is my spiritual master. So the very next year, 1976, he actually got to meet Srila Prabhupada. He got given an initiation and second initiation simultaneously. And then within 3 months, he was given sannyas initiation. Phenomenal story. But that's really only where the story begins. Because, of course, having met Srila Prabhupada and received his divine instructions in mercy, he then dedicated his life to serve him wholeheartedly. And the way that he did that, one of the instructions Srila Prabhupada gave him was to translate his major works into Bengali. So His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami had done that by 1995, a massive achievement. And then in 1996, he thought he wanted to glorify Prabhupada to the world, because many people had read Lilamrit. It may have been distributed, but Maharaj realized that the way to get to the masses was through TV. And so he did that, and Abhay Charan was born. So in 1996, he started this amazing project, distributed around the world DVDs, and it was actually on Indian TV as well. So Srila Prabhupada became a household name simply because of that. And now, of course, Maharaj has thousands of disciples and is a spiritual master himself. So we are most blessed to have him with us here today, and to get some real insights into who Srila Prabhupada is. And next to Maharaj is a very good friend of mine, a guide, a mentor, His Grace, Sutapa Prabhu. Many of you know Sutapa Prabhu. He's a really great guy. He really is. And I've got to say, I love him from the bottom of my heart. I don't love him enough to move into the ashram, but because I love my wife just a little bit more. But that was the only reason. Amazing personality. So just quick show of hands. How many of you here have read the Veda book? Yeah? So that was Sutapa Prabhu who helped compile that. How many people have come across the Gita acronyms book? Sutapa Prabhu. And most recently, I've just finished a course on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, a fantastic course, and Sutapa's also made that very, very accessible with a book that I really recommend all of you try and get hold of and do that book. So Sutapa Prabhu will be asking the questions, perfect questions, and Maharaj will be giving us perfect answers. The format is that their transcendental dialogue will go on for about 50 minutes to an hour, and then we'll open up to the floor for questions. So if we could just welcome them in the traditional style, which is to raise your hands and chant the name Hari Bol. Are we ready? Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol!
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Nandagopa, for the introduction. The offer is always open if you do decide to change your mind. And really thank you, all of you, for coming this evening. Of course, special thanks to Maharaj for being with us. Hands up, who in the room has met Srila Prabhupada? Just one devotee, Krishna Govinda Prabhu. So for us who have never seen Srila Prabhupada, at least face to face, having the opportunity to hear from his disciples, those who spent time with him, who served him so lovingly, is a very great opportunity. And therefore we're very honored to have Maharaj here. Just a few days ago, I was listening to Srila Prabhupada, who was lecturing in LA, Los Angeles, at his headquarters in the West. And at the end of the class, one of the devotees put his hand up and said, Srila Prabhupada, we are distributing these sweets. Yeah, some of you had coconut ice sweets at the manor. Yeah. He said, we are distributing these sweets to people. What will be the effect? Srila Prabhupada looked at him, smiled and said, these sweets are simply wonderful, and he will become simply wonderful. This prasadam is simply wonderful. This philosophy is simply wonderful. This process is simply wonderful. And you are simply wonderful. And your Krishna is simply wonderful. And then one devotee stood up and said, Srila Prabhupada, "You are simply wonderful." And everyone resounded with a very big Jai Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. So Srila Prabhupada is truly simply wonderful. And today we'll have an opportunity to understand Srila Prabhupada a little better, maybe develop our relationship with Srila Prabhupada in a more significant way. I will ask Maharaj some questions, I'm coming to that. But I just want to share a few things with you. If you look around in the room, you can take a look around, very wonderful devotees here. It's a very warm atmosphere, it's a very wonderful atmosphere, a very spiritual atmosphere. We're all sitting here. Now maybe we can turn the clock back 50 years, as Nandagopa Prabhu was explaining, and think about Srila Prabhupada in New York. Srila Prabhupada in New York in 1966. No finance, no followers, no friends, no even in one sense clear strategy of how he would achieve what he wanted to achieve. A lone mendicant, penniless in New York City. I'll read you a few excerpts from Srila Prabhupada's diaries in April and May of 1966. One day Srila Prabhupada writes in his diary, "There was no response of the visitors invited to come and join Hari Kirtan this evening at 7:30 p.m. But I alone executed the Kirtan ceremony with my TR till 10 p.m. Srila Prabhupada says, I executed it alone with my TR till 10 p.m. You may be wondering what TR is. Tape recorder. Srila Prabhupada was gifted a tape recorder, and of course he had the instruction of his spiritual master that if you hold a program and no one comes, just preach to the four walls. So indeed, Srila Prabhupada was holding events, programs, and no one would come. On this particular day, Srila Prabhupada spoke alone in the room for 2.5 hours with simply the tape recorder on. This is the struggle that Srila Prabhupada went through. Srila Prabhupada moved to 72nd Street. There in Dr. Mishra's apartment, he writes, "Today, when I came back from Dr. Mishra's apartment at 1 p.m., I saw my window on the door broken, and entering the door, I saw my tape recorder, typewriter, and books all stolen. A separate note is written in this connection. At 2 p.m., Mr. Labelan came to take me to the ashram, and I went there. The whole thing was set up." Srila Prabhupada was in the room. He arrived back and the cleaner said, "Someone has broken, they've taken these belongings." After a few minutes, Srila Prabhupada could immediately understand the cleaner was the thief. But he had no proof. What could he do? Very disappointed. The very next day after that theft, Srila Prabhupada went to the pier, to the Scindia Steamship Navigation Office, and was inquiring, when is the next ship going back to India? He told the steamship ticket officer, his name was Jamie Forrester, someone has stolen my possessions. The ticket officer said, "Welcome to the club." This is what happens in New York City. Srila Prabhupada lost his desire to stay in that room 307 with Dr. Mishra. He got an invitation to move to the Bowery. Now the Bowery, I don't know what you would compare the Bowery to. Maybe Stonebridge or Halsden. I grew up in those kind of places. This was considered the lowest of the low, the Skid Row. This is where all the alcoholics, the drug addicts, the homeless, this is the district they were in. Srila Prabhupada said, when I would go into the room, I would have to step over 3 or 4 alcoholics who had passed out on the floor to get to my room. One day, Srila Prabhupada said, I walked over one of them and I realized he was dead. Later on, Srila Prabhupada said, but actually they were very nice. They were very respectful to me. They used to say, Hare Krishna. This is where Srila Prabhupada was, in the Bowery. And in the Bowery, Srila Prabhupada writes, you can close your eyes and maybe meditate on this. This is the diary entry from the 21st of May. Today is the 21st of May. This is the diary entry from 21st of May, 1966. Srila Prabhupada living in the Bowery. Both Paul and I were at the ashram the whole day. We came back at 8 p.m. It is seen that somebody came in. Paul says the door was open. There was an electric table lamp on. Later on, it was found that $75, which was kept in Paul's drawer, is taken away. I think the situation is not safe. We have to arrange for safety, otherwise it is risky business to remain here. So while we're sitting here in this room, in this very wonderful Vaishnava Sangha, we can maybe take some time to deeply think about what Srila Prabhupada went through in order to establish this wonderful society and this wonderful Sangha for us. So Maharaj, thank you for being here. And I just wanted to say that to give us some kind of context to what we're discussing today. And I guess my first question to you, Maharaj, would be, what was your first interaction with Srila Prabhupada, and what kind of impression did that create within you?
Hare Krishna. Well, I don't want to take too long, but I just want to say that I'm very happy to be here with you all. I would like to say a lot more, but I hope you understand what I meant. I actually joined as I forgot his Nandagop Prabhu mentioned that I read the Nectar of Devotion and I became convinced that this is what I was searching for. And so soon after that I actually joined in Mayapur. At that time Srila Prabhupada was in America, so I was waiting for Prabhupada to come back. And then finally we got to know that Prabhupada was in Kumbh Mela in Allahabad. And a group of devotees were going to Kumbh Mela from Mayapur. So I was included in that group and I went to Allahabad. And I was so eager to meet Srila Prabhupada that as soon as I arrived there, I just kept my things in the tent and went straight to meet Srila Prabhupada. So when I came to that area where Prabhupada's tent was, it was actually walled with corrugated tin sheets, and there was an entrance. And there was one devotee was guarding that gate, and he stopped me and told me that I could come in the evening to see Srila Prabhupada. So I left and while I was just walking back, one of my senior godbrothers from Mayapur, he was Bhavananda Goswami at that time. So he was carrying a basket of vegetables that he brought from Mayapur for Srila Prabhupada. And he told me, come, I'm going to Srila Prabhupada. So I just went along with him. And then we went in, and from outside the tent, I could see that Srila Prabhupada was sitting inside. So when I saw Srila Prabhupada, I just offered obeisances. In the meantime, Bhavananda Prabhu just walked in to the tent, but as I tried to go in, at that time Prabhupada's secretary was Rameshwar Swami. he stopped me, said that Prabhupada is taking prasad, so don't go in now. So again disappointed, I left, cursing myself. Why did I have to offer obeisances? If I walked into the tent with Bhavananda, then nobody would have stopped me. But one thing I realized, how difficult it was to approach Srila Prabhupada. And I realized at that time that Prabhupada had about 10,000 followers at that time. So naturally, it was not easy it wouldn't have been easy to approach Srila Prabhupada. And I accepted that, okay, from now on, I'm not going to try to meet Srila Prabhupada or get close to Srila Prabhupada. Let me just render service. So I was just going out distributing books. And in the evening when I came back, I was so absorbed in distributing. You see, Allahabad Kumbh Mela, is a gathering of innumerable pilgrims. And they all are very pious, and books are just going out, like people are so keen to take the books. So I got completely absorbed in distributing books, and as a result of that, I forgot that Prabhupada was going to give darshan at certain time. So I ran back, and the tent was full, packed with people. So I just somehow squeezed in, and that's the first time I actually saw Srila Prabhupada. And my impression actually was that people were sort of shooting questions to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was so easily, answering those questions. One encounter I remember very nicely, very vividly. One man was a nice-looking Indian gentleman, looked quite dignified, and so he asked Srila Prabhupada in a rather challenging way, why are you building these new temples? At that time the Vrindavan temple was just built, and it was quite a impressive thing, talk of the town. So he was actually talking about that, like why you're building temples when there's so many old temples needing repair. And Prabhupada's response, Prabhupada did not answer him directly. So he asked, who is the lady sitting next to you? So he said, she's my wife. Then Prabhupada asked, why did you get married? And he couldn't answer that question. So then Prabhupada said, putrarthi kriyate bharja. One gets married in order to have children. So he got married to have children. But why have children when there are so many children loitering in the streets? Why have you? And then Prabhupada explained, just as you want to have your own children, devotee wants to offer his temple to Krishna, build temples to Krishna. Anyway, so this was kind of my first impression of Srila Prabhupada. But the real meeting actually took place. As I said, I kind of gave up the idea of going, going near Srila Prabhupada or kind of, having any kind of a personal exchange with him. And then one morning, it was announced that Prabhupada decided to leave that day. I just accepted, okay, Prabhupada decided to leave, although he was supposed to stay in Kumbh Mela for 2-3 weeks, but now he is leaving all of a sudden. I just heard it but didn't really think much about it. And then Bhavananda Prabhu came and told me that Prabhupada is leaving today. So I said, yes, I heard. Then he said he'll be traveling in a train that has been reserved for him, in a Calcutta-bound train. A carriage will be hooked in to the train, and a few devotees will be traveling with Srila Prabhupada. And then he said, and you have been included in that team. So I was naturally very excited, and And then that's how I got the opportunity to travel with Srila Prabhupada in the train. The train started at night, so soon after it started we took rest. The next morning after taking bath I was chanting, and then Bhavananda Prabhu came and told me, "Come, I'll take you to Srila Prabhupada." Because he knew how eager I was to meet Srila Prabhupada. So, but when he said that, "Come, I'll take you to Srila Prabhupada," I had kind of a feeling as if I'm not qualified to go near Srila Prabhupada. I don't know what that feeling actually was, some sort of, anyway. And Bhavananda Prabhu could understand, so he took me by my hand, he held my hand, dragged me through the corridor, opened Srila Prabhupada's door to the compartment, and pushed me in. So I offered obeisances, and when I got up I saw that Prabhupada was looking at me, and then Prabhupada told me, "Come, sit here." You see, the first class compartment in Indian trains have two seats facing each other. In the other seat there was Bhavananda Maharaj, Jayapataka Maharaj and Rameshwar Maharaj. Abhiram Prabhu, who was the temple president of Calcutta at that time, he was sitting on the floor, and Prabhupada was sitting on the other seat. So Prabhupada asked me to sit next to him. So I said, "Prabhupada, I would rather sit on the floor." And Prabhupada said, "No, you can sit here." And so one blanket was spread over the seat, so I rolled the blanket and sat on the corner. And after some initial exchanges, Srila Prabhupada told me, "You translate my books into Bengali." And that actually, that service gave me an easy access to Srila Prabhupada. Because I was he gave, like everybody after that got to know that how Prabhupada in the first meeting gave me that assignment. And so I could go to Srila Prabhupada any time with the excuse that I have to show the translation. And so that is how my first encounter actually took place with Srila Prabhupada.
And Maharaj, in your time, obviously you were the personal servant to Srila Prabhupada, and you must have observed many disciples interacting with Srila Prabhupada. And what is on my mind, what I'm thinking of is, how can we actually endear ourselves to Srila Prabhupada? And what I'm wondering is, in your time that you witnessed different of your god brothers and god sisters interacting with Srila Prabhupada, was there anyone in particular or any examples that you can think of disciples who were able to really endear themselves to Srila Prabhupada, who were able to really conquer Srila Prabhupada's heart by the way they conducted themselves and their Krishna consciousness? And I'm wondering if there's any examples you can give us that may give us some kind of insight into how we can do something similar in our life.
Yeah, to answer this question, the first thing I would like to say is that, we have to recognize that everyone's relationship with Srila Prabhupada is a spiritual relationship. And it is not limited to our physical exchange or physical contact. So even though they who did not meet Srila Prabhupada can, have the association of Srila Prabhupada. Because, as you know, like we have a spiritual master has two aspects, the Vani and the Vapu, his physical form and instructions. The physical form is temporary, but the instructions are eternal. Through that instructions we can associate, and the sincere souls will continue to associate with Srila Prabhupada through their, by following Srila Prabhupada's instructions. So I just wanted to make that point clear that it's not that, like the relationship with Srila Prabhupada is limited only to those who had their personal association with him. And as far as, like, yes, I have seen some wonderful loving exchanges. Like, one thing I can just say in that respect. Before I met Srila Prabhupada, I always liked to hear about Srila Prabhupada. And I used to ask the devotees who met Srila Prabhupada how he was and what recollections they had of Srila Prabhupada. And there was one Indian gentleman who was a businessman, but he retired and left his business and joined Mayapur. And I often used to talk to him. His name was Kamal Narayan Prabhu. So one day I was talking to him, asking about Srila Prabhupada, and he was telling me that the most wonderful thing about Srila Prabhupada, the way he conquered the hearts of the devotees, his followers. And he said that Prabhupada's followers love him so much that they would do anything that Prabhupada would ask them to do. Even if Prabhupada asked them to jump from the top of a skyscraper, they would do that. Of course, not that Srila Prabhupada would ever ask anyone to jump from the top of a skyscraper, but that was the spirit, that was the mood of the devotees. And that is one thing I can tell, like, about what kind of relationship the devotees used to have with Srila Prabhupada. Or it is not that just something that happened just like that. It was a natural development as a result of natural reciprocation. What Srila Prabhupada gave them, otherwise consider, like, why all these young American boys and girls, would commit themselves the way they did to Srila Prabhupada. What was that made them commit themselves or offer themselves to Srila Prabhupada? It was actually Prabhupada's love. They felt the way that Prabhupada loved them kind of naturally won their hearts and got complete. Then they completely surrendered themselves to Srila Prabhupada. And another one incident that I want to kind of point out in that respect. You see, just before Srila Prabhupada, soon before Srila Prabhupada left the planet, Prabhupada wanted to go out on a Vrindavan Parikrama on bullock cart. And those of us who were serving Srila Prabhupada were dead against that idea, because we knew that Prabhupada was not in a condition to go out on a bullock cart ride, because the roads of Vrindavan was full of potholes. Bullock cart ride is, as it is, it can be quite uncomfortable. And at least my feeling was that Prabhupada was planning to do that, to leave his body like that. And we could not allow that to happen. But the other devotees, those who are not so close to Srila Prabhupada, serving Srila Prabhupada so closely, they got very excited. Oh, Prabhupada is going to go out in a bullock cart, Parikrama of Vrindavan. And so, we were, kind of a tense, the situation became quite tense at that time. Some, devotees wanted to take Srila Prabhupada on a bullock cart, Parikrama, and we didn't want to let him go. And I was, although I was very much against it and I was objecting to that, and then I was expecting that Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Bhavananda Maharaj, who were very senior devotees, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was Prabhupada's secretary at that time, and they would do something. But I was quite kind of wondering why they are not stopping Srila Prabhupada. And anyway, so then at one time when they were discussing about going out in parikrama, they were planning not only going out in the parikrama, that Prabhupada would stay under a tree in a tent. And November, at that time, the weather was quite cold. And I just, couldn't contain myself. I just couldn't, I just kind of blurted out, quite disturbed. That, do you know that Prabhupada cannot even turn to his side? And if we are not careful while we are helping him to turn to his side, he feels pain. And you are planning to take him on a bullock cart ride. You are thinking of putting him in a tent under a tree, in this room with the heater and 3 blankets and a quilt. Srila Prabhupada feels cold at night. So then when I kind of shouted like that, it's all in front of Srila Prabhupada. So everyone was silent, and then Prabhupada said, okay, Babaji Maharaj will come. Prabhupada's godbrother was Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. So Babaji Maharaj will come and I'll ask him what he thinks. So I thought that may be a way to stop him. I'll tell Babaji Maharaj about that, and so Babaji Maharaj was supposed to come in the evening, and I was waiting. But in the meantime, I actually went to the kitchen to do something. And when I came back to Prabhupada's room, I saw Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj is already there. And Prabhupada and him are planning to go out in the parikrama. Prabhupada is even, and Babaji Maharaj is also excitedly, kind of. So my last hope was gone, So I got an idea. I went to the kitchen, made a plate, a fruit plate for Babaji Maharaj, and I came and told Prabhupada, I got some prasad for Babaji Maharaj. Prabhupada said, okay, bring it. So I said, no, I kept it in the next room, Prabhupada. So Prabhupada told Babaji Maharaj, so please go and take some prasad. So when Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj was taking the prasad, and so I told him what actually happened. Like Loknath Maharaj went to Badarik Ashram, and he was describing he came and he was telling Srila Prabhupada about how he went to Badrinath, he went to Vasudev's cave and offered Prabhupada's Bhagavatam there. And then he went to the place where Bhima left his body. Probably you remember how the Pandavas left on Mahaprasthan. They just kept on walking and they left their bodies. So Bhima was the last one to leave his body. And he left his body high up in the Himalayas. And soon after, practically right after that, Srila Prabhupada actually told Loknath Maharaj that you are expert in bullock cart arrangement. So can you arrange a bullock cart parikrama of me, for a bullock cart parikrama of Vrindavan for me? So that's what actually gave me an impression. Prabhupada heard about how Bhima left his body, and then he is talking about going out in Vrindavan parikrama. Like it sounded like Prabhupada is going out on a Mahaprasthan to leave his body. So I told Babaji Maharaj all that, like why I am suspecting that Prabhupada is actually planning to leave his body in this way. So then Babaji Maharaj said, then he shouldn't go. So I said, Babaji Maharaj, please tell him not to go. So Babaji Maharaj's reaction was, me? How can I tell him? I said, Babaji Maharaj, you are the only one he may listen to. So please. So he just got up and I gave him the water to wash his mouth. He just marched into Prabhupada's room and said, I heard everything and I don't think you should go out in parikrama. Then Prabhupada said, okay, Babaji Maharaj, if you feel that way, then I won't go. And when I heard that, I just jumped with joy and ran to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, tell Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Like Tamal Krishna Maharaj and I used to stay in one room in the guest house. So when I was going up the stairs and I saw Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Bhavananda Maharaj they're coming down. And so I told what happened, right standing on the staircase. So then they just also came to Srila Prabhupada's room. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj just said, Prabhupada, you put us through such anxiety at times that we don't really know how to deal with that. And in this way, he just kept on, speaking. So Prabhupada turned towards Babaji Maharaj and told him, see how much they love me. So that is one incident, like as you asked, like some, memorable encounter. Like, yes, the devotees had so much love for Srila Prabhupada. And especially Tamal Krishna Maharaj was... You see, Tamal Krishna Maharaj dropped everything to come and serve Srila Prabhupada. He had many zonal responsibilities. He was a very prominent leader. And he relinquished all his responsibilities and came to India just to serve Srila Prabhupada. And mind you, at that time Srila Prabhupada's health condition was deteriorating. But it was not so critical. But he just came to just be with Srila Prabhupada. And he did. And that's the time I also started to serve Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada made me his secretary for Indian affairs and told Tamal Krishna Maharaj about that appointment and suggested that I move into the room where he was staying. So that gave me another opportunity to come very close to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who was a wonderful devotee. And yes, I saw how much love he had. I saw so many devotees, like they had so much love. Bhavananda also had so much love for Srila Prabhupada. Jayapataka Maharaj, Rameshwar Maharaj, Bhagavan. Anyway, like, those who came... Okay, that reminds me of another thing, another incident also. One day, one devotee was lamenting to Srila Prabhupada that he was so fallen before he came to Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada's response was, that was all superficial. Because when I called, you came. So that also gave me an impression that many of those devotees were not just by chance that they came to Krishna consciousness. It was some divine arrangement that they were sent. Prabhupada himself also said that once during his Vas Puja, during his Guru Maharaj's Vas Puja, he was glorifying his spiritual master and he was telling that all these devotees were actually sent by his Guru Maharaj to help him. And while speaking like that, Prabhupada started to cry. So, yes, many of those devotees who came and joined ISKCON, they are very special souls who came to serve Srila Prabhupada at a very critical time.
Maharaj, when we hear these stories of Srila Prabhupada's disciples who made such a sacrifice, just gave up everything, were willing to just take acute risks to serve Srila Prabhupada. And we hear, speaking for myself, I hear of the austerities and the sacrifices and the endeavors that they made. And then I look at my own life and maybe our own generation of devotees, and we think, what sacrifice can we make? What austerities did we perform it seems as though it's such a lofty thing that we can never even come close to such a level of dedication to Srila Prabhupada.
Well, if you ask me, I will say that I never really considered anything as an austerity. Or rather, I mean, it was fun to be in ISKCON. We were thoroughly enjoying our involvement. And I miss those days, like, I mean, to recall, those days. We used to have Bhagavad Gita class in the evening. And after Bhagavad Gita class, we used to wait for the Mahaprasad to come to us. So night offering, the sweets the plates of sweets used to come, and we used to get the Mahaprasad. And then we would go back to our rooms. Those rooms, probably you remember, in Mayapur, now they have all the shops on the wall. That is where that was the place where we used to stay. There was no bathroom for taking shower. The hand pumps, so we would just go to the hand pump to take a bath. And the thing is, like, after coming back, like, it used to be quite late, around 9:30. And still we wouldn't go to sleep, we would just sit there and talk about, our spiritual experiences. And often we would just sit together, in a circle, and we would read from Krishna book or, Bhagavatam. And we would just pass the book at one to the other, and we'd read in a group like that. We used to have a wonderful time. And like another thought that comes to my mind is, when you give up the bad for the good, then it's not sacrifice, it's a gain. So I think, it was like, most of us, and I think you all also feel the same way. Now, why did we waste so many years of our life in all kinds of useless activities? Why couldn't I be in the movement much earlier? And in a way, I envy those who are born in Krishna consciousness. So, and Prabhupada also used to say that devotional service is happily executed. Susukham kartum abhayam. So it's all Krishna consciousness is fun.
Raj, I can definitely say when we see the videos and see the footage of Srila Prabhupada and the kirtans and the ecstasy of the devotees, and I don't know about everyone else, but when I see that, I think, of course, Srila Prabhupada never talked about the good old days, but they seem like very special times, extremely special times, and I'm wondering how we can bring back that kind of ecstasy and those good times that you talk about. What is it that we can create amongst ourselves that will bring back that very strong presence and love and focus on Srila Prabhupada?
I think that feeling will always be there, Like today, what we are going through, our next generation will say, like those days were so wonderful. Past is always so, the memories of the past is always so sweet. And of course, when Prabhupada was here, it was a very special time. And, like, it was, for me, it was very difficult when Srila Prabhupada left the planet. Because, three of us were with Prabhupada practically 24 hours a day. Just we'll take some, rest once in a while, like Tamakrishna Maharaj, Upendra Prabhu, and myself. Our days used to revolve around Srila Prabhupada. And when Prabhupada left the planet, like it was like my world became completely empty. I didn't know what to do. And anyway, so yes, it was a special time, but that kind of special time do not last forever. But I think they become an impetus to go back to Srila Prabhupada once again and not be separated from him again. And that opportunity is there for open to everyone, all of us. Like when we go back to the spiritual sky, we'll find Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Baladev Vidyabhushan, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, all of them will be there. So let us take to our spiritual life with full earnestness so that someday we can be transported to that world.
Raj. I have more questions.
Yeah, sure.
But at this point, I would like to just open it up and see whether there would be any questions from.
I think you have
10
10 more minutes. I mean, if you
it's
want.
only 10 minutes. Oh.
No, you said 50 minutes. You and I would discuss.
And then we finish?
10 minutes and then we'll open it up.
Oh, 10 minutes and then we open it up. Okay. Maybe we open it up now. I have a few
Okay,
for the
fine.
end.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Anyone like to ask a question on any topic that's been?
Maharaj, every time I hear this pastime in Vrindavan, it kind of really breaks part of me in the heart, because you see Prabhupada wanted something, but you see his disciples, like you said to Krishna Maharaj, he was going through so much anxiety that he had to see what would be best for Prabhupada, even though Prabhupada wanted something else. He wanted to go. So can you explain how that interaction when the spiritual master is instructing you, or he's saying that this is what he wants, and you have to almost I can't understand that.
Okay. Yeah, to understand that you have to stand on my shoes. Right? It's not something that you can judge it from a distance. Why I was feeling that way? You see, Prabhupada was in Rishikesh, and Prabhupada, one night, Prabhupada told us that he's going to leave his body, and he wanted to leave his body in Vrindavan. And he wanted us to take him to Vrindavan immediately. So the next morning, we left Rishikesh for Vrindavan. And when Prabhupada came to Vrindavan, everybody knew that Prabhupada came to leave his body. But when Tamal Krishna Maharaj we stopped in Delhi, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj called Adikeshav Swami, who was the GBC of New York, and he told him that Prabhupada wanted to leave his body, and he wanted him to inform all the senior devotees. So, those days in India, I don't know, to make a telephone call was practically impossible thing, even local calls. Anyway, so the news actually spread, and many devotees came, senior devotees came to Vrindavan. So they had a meeting, and they decided to request Prabhupada to stay. And their appeal was, Prabhupada, you are a pure devotee of Krishna. So if you desire something, then Krishna will grant it. So please stay for our sake, because we are children in our spiritual life. If you leave, we'll become orphans. So when that was presented to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada agreed to stay. Like, mind you, for about 3 days, Srila Prabhupada didn't take anything. He was actually stopped eating, stopped drinking, just in order to give up his body. And so and they requested like that, then Prabhupada agreed to stay on. Then Prabhupada, although Prabhupada told me not to cook for him and not to force him to eat, he told me before, when he came to Vrindavan, don't cook anything for me. I used to cook for Srila Prabhupada. Don't cook for me and don't force me to eat anything. What's the point in eating when there is no appetite? But, when Prabhupada decided to stay, I didn't even ask him. I went to the kitchen and started to cook for him. And then one day, Prabhupada, one afternoon after Srila Prabhupada took his prasad, he asked me, do you know where is Gopinath Bazaar? I said, Prabhupada, this is the first visit to Vrindavan and I didn't even step out of the temple. But you can tell me what you want so I can get it. Then Prabhupada said, go to Gopinath Bazaar. There's an Ayurvedic doctor called Banamali Kaviraj. He knows me. You tell him that I wanted him to treat me. So this is how Prabhupada started to take the treatment of Banamali Kaviraj. And Prabhupada's condition started to improve. And when his condition started to improve, then Prabhupada wanted to leave for the West. I told Banamali Kaviraj that Prabhupada is planning to leave for the West. He said, please don't let him go now. My medicine is working, and in winter time I will give him Makaradhaj, which will build him up. And by the time his condition will improve, and also the cold of the winter will help him to retain that medicine. And so I told Tamal Krishna Maharaj that's what Banamali Kaviraj said. Tamal Krishna Maharaj's response was that Prabhupada wants to go. So what can be done? What can we do? And he even jokingly told the Prabhupada, Bhakti Charu Maharaj wants to keep you here and I want to take you out. So let us see who wins. So I said, no, it's not a matter of whatever Prabhupada wants, that would be. And then Prabhupada left India. Prabhupada came to London. His original plan was to London, New York, Gitanagari, Los Angeles, and Hawaii. But he came to London and his health condition deteriorated so bad. And then that he went back, he cancelled all his programs, he went back to India. You can't imagine, like already his condition was quite bad. But after he went back from London, it was, like for example, once I told Prabhupada, when I came to Prabhupada, I told him, Prabhupada, you became so thin. And Prabhupada said, yes, now it's just a set of bones in a bag of skin. And it was practically like that, a set of bones in a bag of skin. He became so thin. And that time, like I used to just feel so bad thinking that why didn't I make this point that Prabhupada shouldn't have gone to the West. Prabhupada should have stayed there, continued. And I was thinking, but like my situation at that time was, I was just a new devotee practically, few months in the movement, although I was so close to Srila Prabhupada, but I was just a new devotee practically. So after that experience, like I personally didn't want to make the same mistake. And the same thing, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was repentant. That, like, why didn't we stop Srila Prabhupada from going? Because if we stopped Srila Prabhupada, then Prabhupada probably would have stayed with us for a few more years. So that was the background, that's why I said, like, in order to understand why we reacted in that way, you have to stand in our shoes. And also, another thing is, although, yes, like you have to accept your spiritual master's desire as the absolute. But when you are serving so closely, then, you can't maintain that attitude. I'll give you an example. Prabhupada was quite, his stomach was not very good. He was not really eating anything. So, like, as I said, like when there is no appetite, what's the point in eating? Then one day, Prabhupada was sitting on the back of the roof of his quarters on the upstairs. You have seen Prabhupada's quarters in Vrindavan? Next to that is actually the deity kitchen. So, and Prabhupada was sitting on a bed on the rooftop, on the roof. And then Prabhupada just said, I was sitting at his feet. So Prabhupada said, see what they're cooking there. And it meant, what they're cooking in the deity kitchen. So I immediately went to the deity kitchen. And there was Bibhu Chaitanya Prabhu, one of our godbrothers. He used to cook for the deities. Very nice devotee. He was cooking kachuris and samosas. So I came back to Srila Prabhupada and told that Bibhu Chaitanya Prabhu is cooking kachuris and samosas. Then Prabhupada said, get some for me. So, when Prabhupada didn't eat for quite some time, and here Prabhupada wanted to eat something. So excited, I just ran. And when I was running, at that time Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Bhavananda Maharaj just came into the roof. And they asked me, what happened? So I said, Prabhupada wanted some kachuris and samosas. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, you can't get kachuris and samosas for Prabhupada. You can't give kachuris and samosas to Prabhupada. And I screamed, but he wanted. Saying that, I just ran, went to Prabhupada's kitchen, got his silver plate, went to the deity kitchen and got 2 kachuris and samosas and brought them to Srila Prabhupada. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Bhavananda Maharaj were sitting on the floor. I gave him the plate, and Prabhupada, it was very hot, so he broke it, smashed it, the samosa. And he started to take a piece and eat. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Bhavananda Maharaj were looking. And Prabhupada looked at them and said, don't see. And their heads just dropped. So the point is that, here Prabhupada wanted, but Tamal Krishna Maharaj had his thing that, no, Prabhupada shouldn't take it. Like when you are serving, that condition comes. And my attitude was Prabhupada wanted, so, And the funny thing is, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I don't know, how many of you knew Tamal Krishna Maharaj? Tamal Krishna Maharaj was famous for his temper. And he had a nickname, Hot Tamal. So after that, he blasted me. He said, you gave this samosas and kachuris to Srila Prabhupada, and he won't be able to sleep the whole night, and he'll become, so uncomfortable. And I was reasoning with him at that same point, but he wanted, what can I do, Kanaya? Anyway, and then, and I was really in anxiety. Maybe Srila Prabhupada will feel uncomfortable. And so next morning when I went to Srila Prabhupada, when he woke up, I saw he had a good rest. And so I felt quite relieved. And At that time, Pishima, Prabhupada's sister, was there. So I told her about that incident. And her reaction was, if Prabhupada wants, he can even digest bricks. Anyway, that's the reason, why we... And the thing is that, ultimately we are we knew that we won't, at least I knew that we won't be able to stop Srila Prabhupada, but an effort was there. But when Babaji Maharaj told Prabhupada, because he understood, then he actually stopped Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
I'll take one more question, if anyone has. No more questions?
You have a question? Go ahead.
I was just thinking how in your life and in the life of your God brothers there was so much surrender or a willingness to surrender immediately. So how does one, in our situation, how does one make the spiritual master's instructions our life and soul?
Yeah, the most important thing is to realize what the spiritual master is offering. When you recognize the value of what he is giving you, then automatically that commitment will be there. Otherwise, it can become a sentimental thing. So we have to recognize the value of Krishna consciousness. And then comes the commitment due to that recognition. And I'm saying this because, we notice, so often the relationship can tend to become sentimental thing, So the thing is that, that's why it's so important to read Prabhupada's books, to recognize the value of it. And here is a person who is giving it to you. For example, if somebody, just a mundane example, if somebody comes and offers you £1 billion, how important you'll think that person is to you. Now consider Krishna consciousness is so valuable that if you accumulate all the wealth of this world, still it will not match it. So here's the person who is giving us that.
Maharaj, just going on from this point, I don't know if you're aware, but sometimes you find followers of the Christian tradition wear a bracelet with the letters WWJD, which stands for What Would Jesus Do? And sometimes I'm thinking devotees would walk around with WWPD, What Would Prabhupada Do?
Right, very good.
And someone can make it maybe. So I'm thinking, Maharaj, that on any particular point, even if we were to put it out amongst all of us, what would Prabhupada do in this situation? We may all have different ideas or opinions or views, perspectives. So sometimes I think, how can we actually understand what Srila Prabhupada wants?
Yeah, that would be the more appropriate way to put it, Instead of what would Prabhupada do, what would Srila Prabhupada want? That will make things a lot easier for us, if we meditate on that, what would Prabhupada expect? What would Prabhupada want me to do? And yes, that's very important.
And what I'm wondering is, how can we actually deeply understand that, grasp that, to be real followers of Srila Prabhupada, to actually understand in a very profound way what his desire would be in any given situation?
Well, the first thing I can say, I mean, whatever little I know of Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada would expect us to become pure devotees. That's what he would want us. He would want us to commit ourselves to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. Or if not all over the world, at least commit ourselves to spread Krishna consciousness. First of all, we have to accept Krishna consciousness wholeheartedly, with all sincerity. And then we have to give it to others. That is the main business that we actually have. It's a very good point, and I think, it doesn't take long to meditate upon, or doesn't take much, doesn't need to go very deep. It's very clear what Prabhupada wants us to do.
And on this point, Maharaj, I think we're coming to a conclusion. As you mentioned, Srila Prabhupada was critically concerned with spreading the movement, spreading the mission, and really establishing Krishna consciousness all over the world in a very significant way. Srila Prabhupada said, my disease is that I'm always thinking big. For all of us here in this room, I'm sure we all have a desire to do something for Srila Prabhupada's mission. Sometimes life is difficult, many responsibilities, duties, obligations, diversions, and other things come in the way. Can you tell us how we can always maintain that focus on the very acute missionary spirit that Srila Prabhupada had, and always keep that meditation of giving Krishna to others, how we can always keep that in the forefront of our lives, despite so many other things that we have to attend to?
You see, preaching or spreading this movement is the most important business we have. And the best way to preach is by setting the examples ourselves. What we must preach, and we must also act in such a way that our preaching becomes a vivid example in front of others. We have to become exemplary ourselves. And and ultimately what is Prabhupada's teachings reminding us? We got a wonderful opportunity, this human form of life. How are you going to take full advantage of it? Because this life is providing us the opportunity to go back to Krishna. Finish off all our business here, which is simply leading us to suffering. Let's finish off this mundane attachments, mundane businesses. Not finish in the sense, in a negatively try to renounce as such or reject as such. But the process is actually to dovetail everything in Krishna consciousness. Not that everybody will become a brahmachari or a sannyasi. Many devotees will become householders. For sannyasis and brahmacharis it's easy, relatively easier, because their lives are completely kind of focused into that mission. But those who are householders, they actually have the challenge. And the reality is most of the individuals in this world will be householders, at least at some point, during some phase of their lives. So they have actually, when you take to household life, you have two options: to get too entangled with your household situation, or remain Krishna conscious and turn your household situation into a service to Krishna. So this is how the householders have to dovetail their situation into devotional service. And there are examples, so many beautiful examples are here, like Shruti Dharma Prabhu, Pranabandhu Prabhu. They're although they're in the household situation, but their whole life is completely committed to Krishna consciousness. Now, maybe everyone will not be able to commit themselves to that extent, but to whatever extent is possible, one should make it a point. Turn your house into a temple. Don't think that it is your house. Don't consider that it's your family, your wife, your children. They're all Krishna's. And you are Krishna's servants, taking care of them. So this is how, we have to mold our lives in Krishna consciousness. And that is how this movement is going to spread. The householders have a wonderful responsibility to set the right standard and examples.
And on a final note, Maharaj, we're coming to the close of this evening. If Srila Prabhupada would walk through the door now and sit in front of...
Oh, wonderful. He'd be so happy. He'd be so happy. But I know one thing. Prabhupada will ask, we are in England, where are the English people? So that's the point that we have to make. It's nice that, Indians are here. There was a time when the Indians were a rare commodity in ISKCON. It was all whites and no Indians. All chiefs, no Indians. But now it's all Indians and very few Westerners. But, this is an international society. Local involvement is very, very important. Anyway, that's my feeling that, Prabhupada would naturally be very happy to see all of you. And at the same, I don't know, but probably Prabhupada didn't say that, because Prabhupada didn't discourage anyone. He always encouraged the devotees. When whatever little service one rendered, Prabhupada was very, very appreciative. And one thing, as I said, Prabhupada would be so happy to see all of you. And how would you all feel if Prabhupada just walked in? You're spellbound. Huh? Naturally, you'll feel very excited also, yeah.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for your time and your insights and your wonderful recollections of Srila Prabhupada. Definitely feel so much more nourished after hearing you and inspired to deepen my relationship with Srila Prabhupada. One final question. Oh, there is a question there. Is it a quick one? Yeah, go for it.
Maharaj, you mentioned that you met Srila Prabhupada at Kumbh Mela. And just recently in Ujjain, where you attempted to Kumbh Mela, maybe at the humbly request you could tell us something about.
Yeah. Kumbh Mela takes place in 4 places. After the churning of the ocean, when Dhanvantari appeared with the pot of nectar, then the demons snatched the nectar pot from him. But they started to fight among themselves, saying, I'll be the first one to drink it. And during that struggle, some nectar fell in 4 different places. Allahabad, Prayag, Haridwar, Nasik and Ujjain. And in Ujjain the thing takes place, Kumbh Mela takes place every 12 years. Other places also. But Allahabad they have Ardha Kumbha also, half Kumbha. So they have the Kumbh Mela every 6 years. And it is a big event, and this year had been very, very remarkable. Because in India the rivers are drying. And so in order to have proper flow of water in Shipra, which is the river there, they have directed Narmada which is a big river with a very massive water flow. And they took that water, pumped that water on top of a hill. And that's also a holy place. And from there, the water is coming down into Shipra. So the river is full now with water. That's what the the government has arranged. The city, the government has spent a lot of money, like 4,500 crores, like, I don't know, according to British calculation what it will be, but according to Indian calculation, it's a lot of money. And the participation was amazing. Today is the last day, and today they had a few million people to come. So this is how popular this Mela is. And anyway, but our understanding is, you see, this is a nectar in a material context. This nectar revives your body. Actually, this body, material body, cannot be immortal. Amrit means nectar which makes the body immortal. But this material body doesn't become immortal. But the real nectar is actually Krishna consciousness, because it situates one in his spiritual identity and makes him truly immortal. So that's why, it's Kumbh Mela is important, but for us, we are not really that. We are involved in Kumbh Mela just for the sake of preaching. And we are serving prasad there. Whoever comes. Millions of people are coming, and whoever comes will get prasad. So that is one aspect. And people are very appreciative of our involvement there. And we had a very nice location this year, because, you see, because we are there, we have very good rapport with the government officials. And they really extended their help and support to us. So much so that many other groups became really envious of us. Thank you.
Thank you again, Maharaj.
You were about to ask a question. Yeah.
I would like to ask many more questions, but I think we do have to end there.
Yeah.
So thank you again, Maharaj. Maharaj, when you speak, it's like timeless. The world, time stops. But we have to move on for the end of the evening. So we pray and hope that you'll come back again soon to spend more time guiding us, inspiring us, instructing us. And I'll hand over now to Nanda Gopal Prabhu to close off the evening. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So thank you very much, Maharaj. You said that if Srila Prabhupada was here now, we would be completely spellbound. But often just when you walk through, I can see from the reaction of the audience that they're equally spellbound by your association and your deep devotion for Krishna and for Prabhupada. So thank you so much for taking time to spend with us.
You.
And thank you, Sutapa Prabhu. Still love you lots. If you haven't done the course at the Manor, the Gita Life course, highly recommended, or the Chaitanya Charitamrita course that Sutapa Prabhu also leads, it will change your life, because it brings the Sastra to life, and you'll realize, you'll really realize how to apply these amazing teachings in your life. So, highly recommended. So thank you to our speakers. If we could thank them, are we feeling maybe a round of applause or Hari Bols? I mean, I'll leave it to you. Hari Bol? feel there was a few devotees that really wanted the Hari Bols. Let's also have the Hari Bols. Thank you very much.